Chapter 8. The Forest. Next morning, the sky was dull and heavy. The fine spring weather had vanished overnight, and Wolf's fine spring spirits had vanished too. He had dreamed of the day when he would see his birthplace. All the way from Rome, he had imagined how it would be, and because he was ignorant, he had imagined landing on the distant shore and going instantly to that place. But once they were on dry land, he had been absorbed by every circumstance, great and small, as it occurred, and so he had almost forgotten those early dreams. Most of all, Fritha had made the Kentish countryside the place he cared for above any other. Now he must leave it, and without the chance to tell her what was afoot. After the excitements and exaltations of the previous day, this was a sad business. On the instructions of the abbot, Brother Adrian had packed food for the travelers. If Siniag and his brothers should be in the city, Wolf said as he took up the bundle and slung it on his shoulder, tell them where we are gone. Brother Adrian gave his dark, rather sardonic smile and said he would do so without fail. A pale and watery sun made barely a shadow on the ground as Wolf and his father, with their bundles on their backs, each carrying a stout stick and with a knife in his belt, set out toward the southwest. There was a good firm road that had been laid by the Romans, and although it had not been repaired for untold years and was full of holes and weeds, yet its directions was clearly seen and it was in regular use. In any case, it ran close by the river, crossed it a few miles outside the city, and for many miles more than within easy reach of the water. Will there be a road all the way? Wolf asked. Halfway, so Siniag said. I cannot remember. Well, I never knew. There was no call to travel then. We had our own roof. We had pasture and growing land and the forest for wood and game. Life was hard, but it was good, until the raids. We knew of such things from travelers, but such happenings had been in the north and the northeast. Then all was changed. Each time I went to the fields or to the workings, I knew I might not see my family again. The workings Wolfson spoke of were those places where iron was dug and forged. Like everything else, these had fallen on bad times when the Romans left, but the craft continued spasmodically. The skill handed down haphazard from the remotest times seemed too strong to die out, though. Perhaps it took something from the material it tamed. It was the clinker from the furnaces that they used to build the roads, Wolfstan said, remembering slowly. The Romans, I mean. We knew that much. There was plenty of it. We used it too. With the stone, it made up a good wall. You could build your house of stone and clinker and roof it with heather thatch. In the country they were plodding through now, there was no stone. Sometimes there was the ruin of a Roman villa, and sometimes the ruins had been made into a home or a hut had been built nearby and the villa used to stall cattle. These places seemed full, even in daylight, of gliding, voiceless ghosts. They came, too, upon villages that were clusters of huts around a central farm, and the buildings and the stockade that enclosed them were of wood. Some of the huts were round and thatched with river reeds. My grandfather's home was such a one, said Wolfstan. The people they saw during that first morning were incurious and ignored the travelers. Living near the city, they were accustomed to the occasional stranger, but they did not welcome him. Should we speak to them? Wolf asked. Should we ask them about their gods? Not here. Too close to the city. It is when we are farthest that we can do the most. At noon they sat by the river and ate some of the bread from their packs. It seemed to Wolf that there was not very much of it, since they were facing several days' march and had no idea what they would find at the end of it. But Wolfson laughed at that. Soon we shall be in the forest. There is game for the catching. We can look after ourselves. Wolf had never seen this side of his father before. He had known Wolfstan only as a man attached to a city way of life. As he spoke to the forest and of fending for themselves, the years seemed to fall away from him, and he looked like a young, vigorous hunter. We have stayed too long, he said now, getting briskly to his feet. Some way ahead the road goes off to the northwest. That is our way. You remember that much, then. Siniag again. He has hunted in the forest borders. His wife came from a forest village. Pick up your bundle. We should be going. Now the sky had cleared a little. No one approached them along the way. None passed from Canterbury on a swift horse. The world was empty of everything but the weedy ruins, the secret villages, and the father and son plodding on to the southwest, and the place that had once been home. That night they camped near the river in a place with a small beach overhung with bushes. In the early evening, Wolfstan had killed a hare that crossed their path. They skinned it and made a fire and cooked it. The night was quite warm and very still. The fire was a protection against inquisitive animals, but a signal to any possibly inquisitive man. so they were careful with it. Siniag had said that the forest for a time had been full of robbers and bandits, but now they had been driven out, though there was always the chance of an outlaw on the run. It is a pity we have no time to cure this, Wolfson said, turning the hare's brown coat in his hand. We could peg it out on the tree trunk, father. By the time we return this way, the sun may have cured it. That is no way to cover your tracks in the forest, Wolf. You must learn better than that still. Wolfstan looked around him in a considering way. It might be secure enough here. The bushes screen it from the track, but not from the sun. So the hare skin was stretched and carefully against the trunk of an oak and pinned with sharpened wooden pegs. It was dark by the time they had finished. They settled down to sleep. Wolf slept at once. Later, opening his eyes, he saw that his father sat on guard by the fire. Much comforted, Wolf slept again. Next day, they were on the move at dawn. They covered the fire carefully, ate some of the hard rye bread, and drank from the stream. Before they set out, they marked the place in their minds so that they might return to it. Indeed, they left it regretfully, knowing that with this second day they moved further into the unknown. The road would end soon, so Siniag had said. Then the forest would swallow them. Already there were more trees, though broken by clearings that told them men were about or had been lately. Now the ruins of the Roman houses, built by men who had settled at the road's edge for the sake of communications, grew fewer, and at last vanished altogether. How far now? Wolf asked. I cannot say, Wolf. I have forgotten too much, and the tracks I knew may be overgrown by now. How will you know the place, father? By the rise of the land and the stream in the combe. By the river that carries the stream along with it to the sea, they used to say. Also by the workings close to the water, where the pond is that cools the iron as it's beaten with hammers. That day's going was hard. The road was still there, but it was more and more sunken into the earth, on, or the earth had piled over it. Grass had grown strongly, and often there were bushes and even trees whose roots were held among the cracked pavement that had heaved up into view as the tree grew stronger. What had been one what had been won from the forest was almost forest again, and when at last the road vanished, who was to say that it was truly ended? More likely it lay still beneath the undergrowth that had rolled forward over it like a new skin. In this kind of country it was easy enough to feed on birds and small mammals killed with a stone from a sling. They had bread enough for the time being, and there was plenty of water, for they no sooner left one stream than they came to another, or to springs bubbling over stones, and you could see the iron in those stones where they were streaked with red and a cold blue. All the time they were looking for signs of villages. Often there were clearings from which wood had been lopped and hauled away. Deer abounded, and they were constantly stopped, as the day moved on to dusk, by the sound of their swift movement in the undergrowth. They had always to pause warily and decide whether beast or man thrust through among the shadows. If we could catch a deer, we should have meat for days, Wolf said. We cannot carry it with us. We could take what we need and leave the rest. That is not good hunting or good husbandry. Kill what you need, no more. There, he grabbed Wolf's arm as a cock pheasant sailed down into a clearing ahead of them and began picking at the ground. There is our supper, he whispered. Wolfson swung his staff and threw. The heavy wooden thing thrashed through the air and broke the bird's back, killing it instantly. Wolf ran forward and picked up the pheasant. It lay in his hands with its head lolling, its eyes closed, yet with a tiny beady slit still showing. The gorgeous feathers, the sweeping tails, were things of such beauty as Wolf had never realized before. The bird was warm in his hands as its nest might be if it had only just flown from there. But the nest soon cooled without the living bird, and the bird soon cooled with the life fled out of it. It was food to hand, and Wolf was hungry. Yet he felt a pang of sorrow, of disappointment almost, that the bird was dead. Wolfstan, more practical, at once took the carcass and began to pluck it. He gave the tail feathers to Wolf, who stuck them in his belt. The small feathers, colored and mottled, lay about the clearing. That night Wolfstan slept first, while Wolf kept watch. There was good shelter there under trees, 20 yards or so off the track. The little eye of the damped down fire seemed to peer at Wolf, who was trying hard not to nod. It was a night with a full moon and a clear sky. Intense shadows lay about the camp. There was a crying of owls about their family affairs, and sometimes a shrill small scream as they pounced and made off with a mouse or a young rat in their talons. There was mystery in the night, and perhaps an unnamed danger. Wolf made the sign of the cross and muttered a prayer under his breath, then for a time felt more comfortable. Then he heard a new sound. It was a rustling, then a cracking of twigs that had about it something determined and threatening. The darkness and loneliness of the night engulfed Wolf. He imagined great animals with fiery eyes approaching to devour him, or men with knives who would seize him and carry him off, and perhaps kill him on an altar to some pagan god. Angrily, Wolf shook himself and straightened his shoulders. It was no more than a deer or a fox, or perhaps a wild cat moving with less stealth than cats usually employ. For a moment or two there was silence. Wolf began to relax. Then he was tense again as a new sound, unmistakable and much closer, came to him from the forest track. Wolf took his father's arm. He spoke close in Wolfson's ear as his eyes opened. "Hush," breathed Wolf. "There is someone on the track, a man's voice, talking very quietly. A man would not be talking to himself in the forest in the middle of the night. That meant these were men. Men could spell danger or the comfort of friendliness. Wolfson rose very cautiously. He had already slipped the knife from his belt. He moved forward slowly, motioning Wolf to follow. The sound of movement along the track continued, but there were no more voices. Perhaps Wolf had imagined that part of it. If so, his father might be angry at being roused for nothing. Then almost at once the voice came again. "We must rest," said a man in an almost whisper. "We have lost their trail now. In the morning we may find it, when it is light again." Someone gave a deep sigh. "Are we lost then? Shall we ever find them? Must we die in the forest?" Wolf thrust his father aside and rushed forward. "Fritha! Fritha! Fritha!" Okay, hey everybody. So Wolf and Wolfston have left to go back to their old town, and it's a couple days journey, and Siniog, Fritha's dad, has kind of given them instructions. Wolfston doesn't really know the area or how to get there because when he lived there, there wasn't a lot of reason for travel. So they're passing all these crumbled Roman buildings because now you remember this is taking place after Rome has left Kent. It's Remember we talked about in class how Rome had way too big of an empire to have enough people to protect it. So as the city of Rome started getting attacked and other places on the other side of their empire would be attacked, they'd have to move their people to protect wherever there was a problem. So Romans have left. And no Romans are occupying that or living there. They know Rome's fallen, and they are seeing all these crumbled Roman buildings, kind of making them a little homesick. That Wolf thought about that in the last chapter too. So they're in the woods and they don't know if there are kind of criminals hiding in the woods who will rob people, if there are dangerous animals. They don't really know their way and they're going to bed and they hear voices. So they're waiting to see, are these going to be friendly people? Do we need to hide from them? Do we need to defend ourselves? And Wolf hears Fritha's voice. So it ends there. We don't know why she would be coming into the woods, but it leaves you kind of wondering. So we'll get into the next chapter and see.